Taxes are due here on the 15th of March, which is a month earlier than they're due in the States. This is part of the fact that I think I've mentioned before, the year cycle here in Japan, the business fiscal year, runs from April until March of the following year. So there's a lot of things there that we kind of keep in mind, but then still when you do taxes, it's still just within January to December of that year, so it can get a little confusing. But we had to get everything done, and I was really behind this year for some reason, and we barely pulled it off. So, but I'm amazed at this time of year. I actually really like doing my taxes. I know it's kind of strange, but I like doing them. I like doing them here too. My biggest dilemma doing them here was that when I started out, I wanted to be able to do things by myself, of course, without having to bother my husband or his dad and mom. And so I tried to ask the city office if they had any materials that were in English. And they looked at me like I was crazy. So they're like, what? And I was like, I need you guys to tell me how to do this in English, you know? There's got to be other people that do taxes in English, you know? They looked at me like I was crazy. And then the people working at the city office got really excited and tried to call their best guy, who was really good at English, supposedly. And he came over and he was all excited to help me out. And he's like, well, I'll tell, you know, he's going to tell me what to do on the form. And so we were looking at the form, and at the very top, he's reading to me, okay, it says here, Jusho, which that means address. And I was like, I know I'm supposed to write my address there. I know I'm supposed to write my name. I don't need you to tell me that. I need you to tell me how to, you know, calculate what kind of, you know, bracket I fall into, you know, where I can file, you know, the extensions and other details like that. All the things that you need to know when you file taxes. And they had no idea what I was talking about. So it was very frustrating. And I think, I have to be fair, I think part of it was that I live in a total hobunk town. And as it was, though, I went to a bigger town to do this because the city hall here didn't have an office that would handle it at the time. So I went to a bigger place, and you'd think, having an airport there and everything, that they'd, you know, have a few foreigners and maybe would have some information in English. I think if you're in Tokyo, still the city office may not have it, but there's more, you know, Let's Help Foreigners groups, and they try to create their own pamphlets that are supposed to help you understand the Japanese tax forms in English. But there's definitely a lack of interest or desire to make things easier for foreigners here in Japan. It's super friendly and everybody's really nice, but it's not very easy to do stuff. Of course, you know, I assume being an American and being, you know, kind of obnoxious in that sense, I assume everything should be in English, of course. But there's little reason for that, knowing that English is so widely used. Although I know Chinese is used more because there's more people who speak Chinese. But you figure they could at least have that. And then, of course, Korean and Chinese for the other many immigrants and people who live here that are not Japanese. But there's definitely a thinking that if you live here, you got to speak the language and you got to read the language and you got to figure it out. So I've always found that very surprising, knowing in the States that if they didn't have it there, they'd be able to get it anywhere. If you wanted help in how to do your taxes in Spanish or French or German or Chinese or Japanese or Korean or anything, they would have it for you probably. So I was always a little surprised by that. I think that can be a little overwhelming, but aside from that, taxes here are not so bad. I think, you know, we run a private business, and so in that sense, as a private business, it's a lot more to our advantage here in Japan than it is, say, for example, in the States, where they charge you ridiculous amounts of tax for being, you know, having your own company. But other than that, you know, the general rules of things are not so complicated. It's pretty straightforward once you kind of work through all the kinks of how to do everything. But one part to this is that there's a thing, the like pension or social security system in Japan, which is called Nenkin, is something that if you want, you kind of control how you pay it. In the States, it's kind of forcibly taken from your paycheck without you really getting a chance to say otherwise. But in Japan, you could actually not pay it, and my husband ran into some trouble because he was in the States for much of his life from when he was in middle school through all of university time. So when he was in university, he was old enough to be paying for the first couple of years of his Social Security payment, but he wasn't here to do that, and so payment wasn't made. And then when we moved here, they were kind of freaking out, wanting us to do back payments. Regardless of if you have a job or not, they still want you to contribute to the fund, of course, so it can be a little tricky and annoying to have to go through all that policy, but definitely some differences to the way things work. And of course here, just like in the States, we're running into a massive problem, more so here. The population is getting so much older and there's just not that many young kids being born. So, you know, the pension or Social Security system is going to be really stressed in the next few years, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. We'll have to see. Japan in general is getting way too old, and like I've said just even before about talking about the reaction after the tsunami, I think people just aren't doing anything, and that's a little sad. I think somebody needs to light a fire somewhere here and get people excited about stuff, but everybody's kind of like, who cares? So, but that's just my character. I like revolutions. So, but I'd love to hear any of your guys' comments or questions. Please feel free to leave them in the comment section below.